Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg. I'm delighted today to have my friend Chuck Morrone on the show, Mr. Strong Towns. Chuck, it is so good to see you, and I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Hey, I'm really happy to be here. And here's the amazing thing. I listen to your podcast. You have a great voice for this. I mean, I have this horrible voice that people have grown used to. But when you turn on, you're like, hey, this is the Messy City Podcast. I'm like, yeah, man, you should be doing way more of this.
Well, at least you didn't say that I have a great face for radio.
Well, you and I both.
Oh, man. Well, it's fun. You know, I'm still very much an amateur at the podcasting gig, and it's been fun to learn and experiment with it. You've been doing it for quite a while, and so I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you on this show. And we've got a couple of fun topics, but and a couple of things that I think will get more serious and interesting as we go, and we'll just get through whatever we can get through.
That sounds great. Well, you've been having all my friends on,
I try to do that.
Yeah, here's Howard. I'm like, wait a sec. That was a blast.
Yeah.
And then you had Seth Zarin on recently. I'm like, that's really cool. So yeah, it's been fun. You know, I know you, and I know, some of the ways that you think about things. And I really I love chatting with you. Hearing you have these fun conversations that we sometimes get to have in person, hearing you have them with other people it's a delight for me. So,
that's very great. Very flattering to hear. You know, it's one of the fun things, you've probably experienced this too. One of the fun things about having a podcast is you get to choose who you want to talk to. And there's a lot of people that we know and we've all known for a long time that I get to learn so much more about.
Sure.
For me, that's been one of the most enjoyable aspects of this, is just getting to really know people's backstories a lot more. And so that's just been a great pleasure. So
yeah. Well, you know everything about me, so we don't need to talk about.
We know a lot about Chuck. Chuck, fortunately, shares his backstory a lot, although I'm sure there's tons we could get into. I'd rather save the time for some other topics, but
yeah, it's the least interesting part.
You do have an awful lot going on right now in this moment. And I want to talk about a couple of those things. One is you have a book, a new book, Escaping the Housing Trap, the Strong Towns Response. This is your third book, right?
Yeah. Number 3. Yep.
Tell me a little bit about why an engineer wanted to write a book about housing.
Well, the reality of the story is that I, in the early days of writing the Strong Towns blog, was thinking about a book the entire time. I mean, I started writing this 3 days a week blog back in 2008. And to me, it was building up to a book. I had a couple publishing companies and agents contact me. And when I gave them my book proposal, it was just blah, 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 blah. It was like a 2,000 word book. Like, it didn't make sense. It was only when I got hooked up with Wiley Publishing where we stepped back and we said, okay, this is actually multiple books. Put this together in like the compilation of what you think it should be. And I said, well, I think I should write the book on finance first. I think I should write the book on transportation second. Third would be housing. And then there's a couple others that are coming. And so we kind of agreed to a 5-book series that would kind of encapsulate the Strong Towns conversation. Housing happened to be the third. And the crazy thing about it is I didn't plan to release it in the middle of a housing crisis where everybody's talking about housing, and housing's like on the lips of, every political debate and every public policy conversation. It just so fortuitously happened that we're dropping our ideas in the middle of this kind of housing, policy feeding frenzy right now. But,
yeah, I mean, that's an interesting aspect of that. If I know, obviously, there's a long timeline to write a book anyway, to write it, get it published, edited, and all that sort of stuff. So, I'm curious, like, what has changed in your mind from the point when you first started thinking about writing this book to actually getting it out today?
So Daniel Harrigus and I co-wrote this, and I know you had him on a couple of weeks ago. It was a really good conversation. The two of us, I think, encapsulate in our thinking the trap that we were trying to illuminate. Because I we both went through the same graduate school program, uh, and we both maybe took different things away from it. He was really focused on housing and kind of the mechanics of zoning, and how the government has intervened in the housing market, and all the kind of things that I would just put like under an urbanist label. And for me, I was really fascinated with the financial side of the whole thing. That was the thing to me that when I was in grad school, I didn't think the housing people made any sense, quite frankly.
Mm.
Like you have to take some of that. And I was like, this is really dumb. Like, I don't get it. And I think I didn't get it because as an engineer, I was more plugged into the finance side. I spent a number of years just reading every book on finance that I could. I actually watched for like 2 years straight. I had CNBC on in my office, not because I think CNBC is like a good channel or like has revealing things, but because
Mhm.
the lingo that they use, the finance lingo that they use, I didn't understand. So when they said like MBS, like what is an MBS? It's a mortgage backed security. When they were talking about interest rate spreads and swaps, like I'm like, what the heck is that? Once I learned that language, to me, the fascinating thing about housing was how it really is at its core downstream of the financial conversation that's going on in this country. So Daniel and I really tried to merge those two together, first in a set of insights that the two of us could agree on, and then in a narrative of the book that we could publish and share with the world.
So, without giving away too much of the book, obviously
Oh,
we want people to go buy the book.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I think it's on, you can pre-order it
Well,
right
it's
now. Is that right?
it's not like it's a murder mystery, like
Yeah.
I'll tell
Yeah.
people the core insights, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of depth there beyond that.
Right.
So,
But maybe how about just tease out a couple of the key insights that you think are critical to share, related to like what the housing trap actually is.
well, the housing trap is this situation we've gotten ourselves in where housing as a financial product needs to go up in value. So that the price of your house needs to go up for the economy to churn. But housing as shelter, when the price goes up, everything falls apart. Lots of people can't get into a house. If they get into a house, they're very financially strained. Once they're in a house, it's tough to move, take another job. So these two things compete against each other, and they're both necessities. I mean, shelter is in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we've literally structured our entire economy to where mortgage-backed securities, your house bundled with a bunch of other houses, sit as the bank reserves for every bank in the country. Housing prices can't go down. They have to go up financially. Housing prices can't go up. They must actually come down for us to be able to function as a society. And that is the trap, because both of those things are true at the same time.
Yeah. 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 I think probably the word of the decade has been financialized,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like we've used that to discuss a lot of the foundation of the economic system we have today, and it certainly affects housing and all forms of real estate.
Well, Daniel and I reached this understanding quite a while ago. I mean, way before we started working on the book, that if you look at the market for housing today, it represents the market of financial products. So when you see developers out building single family homes on the edge of Kansas City, what you're seeing is the manifestation of a financial instrument. The mortgage bundled with other mortgages, securitized, sold off as a mortgage backed security. There's a lot of liquidity, there's a lot of money and capital put into that product because it's a really good financial product. When you see the 5/1s being built, the one story of concrete with 5 stories of wood construction, whether it is an apartment building or a condo, whether it's a high end condo or a mid level condo, whatever it is, those also are financial products. Those are really easy to bundle with other similar structures from all over the country. Again, securitized, sold off, bought up by pension funds, put on the books of banks, all this stuff. What you don't see is you don't see the single family home converted to duplex. You don't see the single family home where we take the fourth bedroom that nobody's using and make it a accessory apartment. you don't see the backyard cottage. You don't see the small 400, 600 square foot starter home because there's no financial product for those things. But those are the products that, if they were available in the local market, would actually anchor the market at a lower price point and keep the rest of it from going crazy. And so the conclusion that we've come to is that we just need a policy to build not more single family homes and not more 5/1s and more apartment buildings. We really need policies to build lots of this starter stuff. And the cool thing about it is that cities can do that on their own. They don't need federal grants and approvals. They don't need state support and funding. They actually have the capacity to really shift their local housing market, make it more locally responsive, and they can do it all on their own. They just have to do it with intention.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you've talked about and written a lot about too is the notion of how after the financial crisis, 2008, 2010 or so, that the housing recovery in many ways has been kind of reinflating a bubble. And I'm fascinated by this because I'm not an economist, although I play one on TV, and it certainly seems like the signs of stress that we've seen in the banking system, even the last, let's say, year and a half, is putting a ton of pressure on the local community banks and continuing to centralize the banking system into larger and larger banks, including like the four banks that are essentially protected by the federal government. So, in essence, it kind of seems like we haven't really, at a federal level, we're almost doubling down on this approach that has given us these large products that we don't really like.
There's no doubt that our strategy when housing starts to level off or go down, as in like 2007, 2008, when housing went down in price, our strategy is to pump more money into the top of the financial funnel in order to keep housing going in the other direction, in order to keep housing from falling. And so, yeah, you have this weird thing where every economist looks back at 2001 to 2008. And when you say housing, what, they'll fill in the blank with bubble. They'll say, yes, it was a housing bubble. And you say, okay, well, in 2008, it started to go down a little bit. And then 2010, it hits bottom and it starts to go back up. And it's way, way higher than is today than it was in 2008. That was a bubble. What is this? And they say, well, that's a housing recovery, right? Like we recovered to a bubble and then beyond. This is, I think we don't know all of the things that we will know after the next reset. Warren Buffett has the saying, you don't know who's swimming naked till the tide goes out, and the financial tide has not gone out yet. So we really don't know where the bodies are buried. But if you listen to financial news, you'll hear a lot of fretting over regional banks, commercial real estate. A lot of people, when they hear commercial real estate, think Walmart or strip mall or franchise restaurant or what have you. Those are certainly part of commercial real estate, but also part of commercial real estate is apartment buildings. Multifamily buildings is a big part of commercial real estate. And those are financed with, at least partially, with short-term financial products at local banks that have to be rolled over. And there is a huge incentive to extend and pretend, to pretend that they'll someday be rented out at high margins, at high prices. And that works when interest rates are low or very stable. But when interest rates rise, those financial products actually decrease in value. Those bonds do. And so banks are less willing to, or less able to really pretend that, in the 100-unit apartment, the 50 units or 40 units that aren't rented will someday be rented at this really high rate. The bank can only pretend so much until, the grim reaper of finance comes for them. And it kind of feels like for regional commercial banks, like that's going to be the shakeout that will make a lot of cascading things in the apartment market be very, very different 6 months, 12 months from now.
Yeah, if I were to maybe tie together a couple of different things. One, you had one of your recent podcasts where you talked about this is an election year, and you kind of went through this, which was great. I really enjoyed it, and I have long enjoyed the way that you have talk about politics and the sort of reframing of the top down versus bottom up, instead of like left right all the time. And I think that's
Yeah.
incredibly helpful to think about. But you mentioned, you kind of talked a little about the old Tip O'Neill phrase and the all politics is local, and how that's shifted to all politics is national today. And I can't help but think about that in relation to like this real estate discussion and financing, where real estate used to be hyper local, and it feels more and more like all real estate is national in that respect, in terms of how we plan, design, and finance whatever is being built.
I think that's a brilliant insight. To me, the question is like, what is the price of the house sensitive to? And a lot of us think that it should be sensitive to the buyer's ability to pay, right? You have a product in the marketplace, there's someone coming to buy it. If that person can't afford it, the market will have to adjust and figure out, is it smaller units? Is it smaller rooms? Is it less appointment? Like, what is it that will make that unit affordable to the person buying it? But our market is completely insensitive to the ability of people to pay. What it is more sensitive to is the macroeconomic funding stream. If we can lower interest rates, if we can print money at the Fed and buy mortgage backed securities, if we can create massive amounts of liquidity, if we can funnel this liquidity to hedge funds and others that will invest in single family homes as rental products or in a commercial backed real estate, what we can do is we can really drive up the price. And so I think from a consumer standpoint, you have to ask, like, what is the product here? We think that the product is us buying a house. We're the consumer, the house is the product. But the reality is that that transaction is incidental to creating what the real product is, which is a mortgage or a commercial real estate certificate, something that can be bundled, can be securitized and sold off. That is what the market is sensitive to, not to your and I ability to pay. We are,
Mhm.
in all sense, not the consumer. We are the product.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. I think that's right. And well, I suppose this topic, since the book is fresh or will be freshly out, will be a big center of discussion at the Strong Towns National Gathering coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I know that I'm scheduled to do a little bit of housing discussion there. Um, the national gathering is really, we don't call it a conference. We call it a gathering because it really is Strong Towns advocates from all over. I would say all over the country, but it's all over North America, and we've got people coming from around the world for this thing. It really is a chance for people to see and learn what other people are doing bottom up to build strong towns. And
Hmm.
housing is certainly part of that and will be part of the discussion. But a big emphasis of the gathering is just to, there's a phrase that I used last year that I'll probably talk about this year again. Is just like, you're not alone. Being an advocate in a city you can feel very alone, like you're the man or the woman against the machine. And the reality is that when people join together in a neighborhood, when they start to gather more people together with them, there's so much that can be done from the bottom up. It's really empowering to get these like local heroes in a room, let them see each other, let them talk to each other, let them hear each other's stories. I feel like that's the most powerful part of the gathering, really.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I certainly enjoyed it last year, and then the first one you had a few years ago in Tulsa. And this one's coming up in Cincinnati, May 14th and 15th.
Yep.
It precedes the Congress for the New Urbanism, and both are well worth attending. So I hope folks who are listening can get out, and if you get a chance to attend, that's great. If you can't, look at it for next year. It's really a cool way to meet people who are interested in the same things. I was really fascinated, Chuck, last year in Charlotte at the. I talked about this with a number of our CNU friends. The difference in the dynamic between the
Yeah.
Strong Towns crowd and the CNU crowd. Seeing that like back to back was really fascinating, and it's completely and utterly anecdotal, and just judging, by what I saw. But I felt like there was a lot of energy in the Strong Towns room, and Strong Town side of things, and generally speaking, a younger crowd. and less, like the CNU crowd long has been focused on the design and building professions, architecture, engineering, planning, and the strong town, which is great. It's fine. We have to do that. But the strong towns crowd was really different, was much more diverse in terms of the backgrounds of the people that were there.
So you and I are, I'm gonna say I'm a little older than you, right? I'm
No,
50 this year.
I'm 54, my friend.
Okay, okay. Well, all right. I assumed I was a little
Yeah.
older than you. You just look younger. That's what it is.
It's just I
Um,
just kept my hair color longer, that's all.
um, you and I have been hanging out together at the CNU for many years, and I remember when I first started going, this was the place of super high energy, right? Like I would go,
Yep.
I would meet all these thinkers and all these people doing
Mhm.
stuff, and we would like debate things in the hallway, and there was all these like side things going on. Remember in Salt Lake City when we did the first
Mhm.
debates? It was
Yeah.
just this like crazy wild party of, and I say party, I don't drink. There was no like, this was a party of like intellect, like it was just like electric in the air.
Yeah.
Um, I have been searching for that the last few years. I've been like, where's that? Like, I want to be in the room with that energy. And I showed up at our gathering last year with high expectations, but really, knowing, having been on the road and met with people, knowing that our movement had a lot of this bottom up energy, a lot of, just very different people, from people who are doing retail and like I sell flowers and I, have a bakery, to people who are, I'm out building homes, I'm doing this stuff, I'm on a planning commission, I'm a mayor of a city. There really is a, when you say diverse, it is a, it's a crazy group of bottom up people, all who self-identify as like, I love my place, I want it to be better. I walked into that room on the opening last year and I'm like, this energy is out of this world. It's
Mhm.
amazing. I'll give you a little like under the hood. I- I'm I wanted last year, like, let's get some music. This should be a party. Like, we're having a party here. Like, everyone's coming together. Let's get some music. And when I got there, and like, I had a thing where my daughter was graduating, like, that was the week of her graduation from high school. And I flew in at the last minute and I had to fly out right away. So it was just like, the timing didn't work well for me. But I got there and like, we didn't have the music because, like, logistically, it wasn't going to work and the sound system wasn't going to work and all that. And I kind of was like a little disappointed. I'm like, oh, I kind of want the vibe to be up here.
Mhm.
I walked in the room and the vibe was up here. And I'm like, if we would have had music, like they would have blown the roof off this place. It would have been a little too crazy because people were amped. They were excited. Um, I've been assured that this year there will be music. So
Oh, good.
we'll see what happens in Cincinnati if we can, get things even more excitement, let's say.
Yeah, well, I look forward to that. I mean, I think like you, I have, it used to be like the CNU, we would come back from a CNU and the adrenaline rush was so crazy that for like a month afterwards, all you could do was think about the stuff that you heard and talked about, and you're like, we've got to do X, Y, and Z now. And I honestly haven't felt that rush in quite a while with CNU. Part of that might just be that I'm getting older, and it's harder for me to feel that, and things change. But there's definitely, I love the excitement of the debate and the discussions, and seeing a lot of younger people there, I think is really cool. So kudos to you guys, and
Thank
hope
you.
it continues.
Thank you. It definitely will. We're committed to it. And, I mean, this thing's going off here in a couple of weeks and we're almost full. So,
Yeah,
I mean, we've
good.
sold hundreds of tickets, people flying in from all over. It will be, it will be really cool.
All right. Well, let's shift and talk about something a little more lighthearted, perhaps. But I want to talk first. Let's talk about baseball,
All right.
something that both of us share an interest in. Both American League Central Division fans of different teams, and obviously there's a rivalry, but honestly, there isn't really much of a rivalry because both teams are never good at the same time.
Who do you like legitimately consider your top rival?
Well, I think for years, the weird thing is it was like the Cardinals, right? But
Oh,
they're not
okay.
even, but they're National League. Uh,
Right. They're not even in your division. right?
Right. So when interleague play started, I think that became a really, really big deal, and those games were enormous in both cities.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
tapered off a lot, and it's probably, the Cardinals have been such a great organization for so long. They probably kind of laugh about it
sure.
amongst themselves.
Hmm.
Anymore, I don't know. When I was growing up, it was the Yankees. It was the Royals and the
Okay.
Yankees,
Yep.
because in the 70s, the Royals had those great teams that won the division every year, 76, 77, 78, and then went to the playoffs and just like lost to the Yankees every year.
Hmm.
And finally turned around in 1980 and won it and went to the World Series. But so for years, there actually was a pretty fierce rivalry between the Royals and the Yankees, but that was, again, not in the same division. So it was a little odd.
We share this in common because the Twins, I think I mean, we did have the record of all sports for most consecutive playoff losses. And losing consecutively in baseball games is hard to do because
Yeah.
even coming in with mismatched teams, you've got a like 40% chance of winning statistically any game. So the idea, I think we lost 17 or 18 in a row
Mm.
postseason, and almost all of those were to the Yankees. And so we
Mm.
had a deep. I mean, I told my daughter growing up, she's 2 years old, and I said, "In this family, we don't hate anybody, but we do hate the Yankees." Um,
Ah,
so I know
yes.
that's an acceptable. But for me in the division, it's the White Sox. Like I'm not a fan of Cleveland. I I don't really care about Detroit all that much. I gotta say, Kansas City does not like. I don't get foaming at the mouth when we're playing Kansas City, but when we play Chicago, the White Sox, I like go ahead and hit every other batter. Like I don't care. I don't like those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And the White Sox, they just have every misfortune. I mean, come on. I think ever since they tore down old Comiskey, it's been like a
Yeah,
curse on that team. Uh,
yeah.
so,
Well,
so speaking
I
of,
took.
go ahead.
Let me tell this story real quick because this will solidify Chicago for me. I took Chloe, my oldest. She came. I was speaking in Chicago once, and she's probably like 5 or 6, like a young kid. We rode the train, the Amtrak to Chicago, and we were just there for a couple of days. I spoke at this conference. The White Sox were playing a game. And so we went to the game because she likes baseball, dad and daughter go to the game. We showed up. She wanted to wear her Twins jersey because, you know, the Twins weren't playing. It was the White Sox versus some other team. I don't even
Hmm.
remember. We walked in to sit down. Little girl with a cute little pink Twins jersey on. People started booing her and yelling at her.
Oh
Like
my God.
literally, like she started crying. She felt bad. I'm like, these people don't deserve this kid. This is the White Sox. I hate you guys. I'm sorry I came to your dumb stadium with my beautiful daughter. Get lost. So,
Well, I say it is their punishment for tearing down a nice stadium, building a horrific
yeah,
one, having a
it was a
lousy
bad
owner.
stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it was probably the worst new baseball stadium built in that
yeah.
entire era. So speaking of new stadiums, one of the things I just want to chat with you about and get your perspective on is we are having a big debate here locally regarding baseball stadiums because the Royals ownership, which is a new ownership group, they bought the team, I guess, 3 years ago. Local people, led by John Sherman, they want to build a new park. They want to leave Kauffman Stadium and build a new park in the downtown area, and which in theory, I and many other people are like, great, let's do it. Sounds awesome.
Yep,
Uh, but obviously we're having this kind of age old debate about how to finance and build a stadium. And in a smaller market like Kansas City, that comes with, fairly large public subsidy one way or another. And the projects themselves just balloon in size, incredibly. So we're talking, instead of a baseball stadium that might be, I don't know, let's say $600 million, now it's a stadium in a district that's 2 billion. And the public is expected to underwrite a significant share of that. So um, we have this, we there's been this knowledge within our world for years that a lot of the economics of this are just kind of silly. But how the hell do cities escape this discussion in this trap, because I'm completely mystified as how we ever get out of this situation where we are subsidizing major league franchises.
I have some weird thoughts on this.
Please share.
And I don't think that I think that people who are going to hear this, and I'm probably just going to make like everybody angry, because I do have like very strange thoughts on this. So let's go out to the edge of Kansas City, where the DOT and the city are actively building interchanges because they want to get more development. What I find frustrating about that, when you go build an interchange and you've got on ramps and off ramps on the highway, you're in a sense robbing the highway capacity, right? Because an interchange creates friction and slows down traffic and all that. In order to get the development on the side of the highway, the frontage roads, the interchange, and all the big box stores and all the stuff that will go there, and then the housing subdivision that will go adjacent to that. The act of building that interchange makes multimillionaires out of a bunch of randos out in the middle of nowhere. It might be the guy who like inherited it from someone who inherited it, or someone from inherited it. Like, and that's probably the most palatable. What generally happens is someone bought it from him a decade ago, and like a land speculator just sat on it and then worked with the DOT to get it developed. But either way, it's a massive cash transfer from the public to private property owners. And I have always said, if we're going to do that, we should do one of two things as a public. We should go out and buy up all that land around where the interchange is going to be. I'm talking like a mile in each direction. We should buy that ahead of time at interchange rates. We should build the interchange, and then the interchange makes the land more valuable. We should then sell the land back to the market at that higher rate and use that amount to pay for the interchange. That, or a more conventional way to do it, would be to do a special assessment, which cities do all the time when they're out building sewer and water. They special assess the whole thing. I'm cognizant of the fact that like the Colosseum in ancient Rome was not built in order to get ancient Rome. Like ancient Rome was what it was. And then wealthy patrons came in and said, I want everybody to think I'm awesome, so I'm going to build this Colosseum and, deck it all out and do all that. I feel like our stadiums are, in a sense, the same thing. And if I were a city working with some very rich people to try to build what is, in a sense, a monument to them and their plaything, this Major League Baseball team, I would want to use the tools of either eminent domain and development, or I would want to use the tools of special assessment to recoup my part of the investment. Because if I'm going to build a baseball stadium, I want it to be Wrigley Field in terms of the intensity of the development around it and what that actually means to the land values in its vicinity. If I'm going to build, I can't remember what the Atlanta one is called. I hate that stadium, the new Cobb Field or something like that.
It's Truist. Is it Truist Park?
Truist.
Yeah.
It's a junk park. Like it might be a nice place, but I like don't like anything about its development. Even, Target Field, which is like one of my, I think Target Field is my favorite park, and I'm biased, obviously, the Minnesota Target Field, but I think it's a great park. I think the way they financed it is really backward, and the development around it has trailed the park by 10 to 15 years because we didn't have the right kind of financial, I'm going to use the word incentives, but I don't mean giveaways. I mean incentives by, like, now you've got a $10 million special assessment in this land. You better build something that's $100 million on it, or you're going to pay a high tax rate year after year after year. You got to make use of this property. We didn't have everybody's incentives aligned when we made the big public investment. And so we didn't get the private investment out of it that we should have got. I could buy into stadiums if we actually had that mindset, because then, the public is not only going to recoup their investment ultimately, but you're going to get like a really nice product at the end.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. Unfortunately, I don't think we don't really have public officials
The
who think
stomach
about it
for
that
it?
way. Yeah. Well, yeah, they don't have the stomach for it. And it,
I mean, Chuck says eminent domain, everything within a
yeah,
mile. I mean, that's crazy. But if you were responsible with your finances, you would do a special assessment.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of logic to that, and that, and maybe you don't even recover all of the public investment, but you could recover a substantial portion of it. Who
Well,
knows?
I think I think you recover some of it up front, right? Like
Mhm.
you can have your upfront, and then you'll have the after effect of basically having the incentives aligned where people will then develop, and then you will collect the rest of it in terms of long-term taxes. I mean, I've watched Kansas City. Our friend Joe
Mhm.
Minicozy did some analysis of tax increment financing deals that Kansas City's done that would make your stomach churn. I mean, just giving away tens of millions of
Mhm.
dollars to the most ludicrous kind of things that will never cash flow. I've watched Kansas City build monstrosity things out on the edge of town and call it growth and call it public investment when the city's guaranteed to lose money on every single one of these things. You don't even need more than a napkin analysis to figure that out. It makes me sad. I would if Kansas City were to become more sophisticated about the public purse, I think they could build a stadium responsibly, but they can't do it without, in a sense, demanding that everyone who's going to get rich on it contributes proportionately to what is being built.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I mean, it seems to me almost like it's sort of a third way thought, thought pattern about it because as I, tried to talk to people locally about it here, unfortunately, with the reality of sports and sports economics today, like a city the size of Kansas City, you're just not going to build a new facility without public investment in it. It's just not going to happen, or you're going to lose the teams, and that
Did New
sucks. But
York
that's where we are. Um,
didn't New York have public subsidy on theirs though too? I
I
mean,
think that
I'm
I think they might have. I know in San Francisco when the Giants built their new stadium, they built it all themselves. Um, and I can't remember some of the new
I know
football stadiums they have.
The
Yeah.
49ers got a huge subsidy on theirs.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, you're like, I'm with you because you and I are both told that we're mid-market teams, and you've suffered the trauma. No, I was going to say you've suffered the trauma of having a football team leave, but that was St.
That was
Louis
St.
that had
Louis.
the
Yeah.
football team leave. That
Uh-huh.
wasn't Kansas City.
Nope.
You guys have the glorious football team.
We do.
Um,
We had a baseball team leave, but that was before I was born. So,
okay, so
but Kansas
that
City
trauma
is. Yeah.
is gone.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
we lost an NBA team and an NHL team in my lifetime. So
really, what was your NBA team? I don't remember that.
it was the Kansas City Kings. They went to Sacramento.
Sacramento. No kidding.
Yeah. In the
I did
80s.
not know that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, at
Um,
one point, we were the smallest city in the country that had all four major sports leagues.
we've been told that Minnesota can't support four because we're too small for that. And there's always I feel like it's one of those things where each team can kind of threaten to leave
Yeah,
because we're the fourth one that can't be supported without a
right.
public stadium. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
It, here's so you have a background in architecture.
Hmm.
Here's what I struggle with stadiums. I feel like, and I'll say this even about my beloved Target Field, we don't build stadiums that will be around to be excavated in the future.
Hmm.
Like the Roman Colosseum, we can look at and we can, see this grandeur and like it's been there thousands of years. We don't build anything that isn't, in a sense, uh, it might have a nice fancy facade and it might be nice. And we've used some decorative brick to make it, look good. But the reality is like we just built a plastic bandbox with some good veneer on it that looks cool. And I like the dimensions, but these aren't like massive public investments meant to endure beyond really a generation. Right. I mean, am I misunderstanding something about how we build these things?
Well, I think there was an era where they were built differently. I think that's probably more commonly the case now. I mean, even Kauffman Stadium is a pretty incredible structure in and of itself. Uh, there were a lot of impressive structures though built in that era in the 60s now that basically are all gone. They're all torn
Yeah.
down and replaced.
Yeah.
It seems more like I they're thought of more like a consumer product now. That
Yeah.
is like you build these stadiums and they're wildly expensive and they're huge, but essentially they're built to last maybe 2 generations. And then we're looking to either completely overhaul it or replace them.
Well, I realized that the Metrodome, which the Metrodome was a special case product where we built the dumbest stadium at the end of the dumb stadium era. And like, I think the year after we built the Metrodome, or 2 years later, Camden Yards was built,
Yeah.
and everyone had buyer's remorse right away. But you're talking about a stadium that at the 18-year mark, they said needs to come down, and we're going to
Yeah.
contract this team and actually have fewer baseball teams because of this bad stadium.
Yeah.
We got Target Field in '08 or '09, somewhere in there. I think somewhere in that range. So, the Metrodome era lasted 24, 25 years. And I remember that, like, the roof caved in on it, and like you blew it
Yeah.
up. Like, no one was sad really to see it go because it was really like a plastic box.
Yeah.
It it seemed to me like it's a consumer good, like it's
Yeah.
just designed. And I wonder if, because Wrigley Field, say what you could tear that down and rebuild it in place, right?
Hmm.
Um, I don't know what it would take to do that. I mean, people would flip out if you did that. They're going to maintain it till it can't be maintained
Right.
anymore. But there's really no question of where the Chicago Cubs will play. And I don't think that's because it's iconic as much as it is embedded in this ecosystem around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
The
so
fact,
so to I'm sorry, Kevin. To me, the key to having a good public stadium investment would be that you have to actually grow the ecosystem around it. So there's some codependency, so that thing actually like could never leave again.
yeah, as our friend Philip Bess would say, who wrote a great little book called City Baseball Magic, which actually was a study of what the White Sox should have done when they replaced Comiskey Park. But he talked about it's just the best ballparks are neighborhood ballparks, and with an
Right.
emphasis on the neighborhood part.
Yeah.
So, Chuck, one fun little bit of baseball park trivia for you.
Uh-oh.
One of the very first projects I worked on as a young architect right out of college uh, was at the Metrodome. You remember at one point they put in like these big vertical screens to block
The
off parts of
baggie?
the seats.
Yeah, the baggie.
Yeah, to block off part of the seats to make it look more full
Uh-huh.
for different events.
Uh-huh.
I did that.
Man, I hated you then. Because
It was a ridiculous project, but
it was
yeah.
so weird, because what it was, the Metrodome was built like a football stadium,
Hmm.
and then they overlaid this baseball stadium within it. And I had season tickets for a while. My brother and I, when I was in grad school, I got them. We went up. The Twins had been historically bad for many years, and they were selling season tickets at an event. And my brother and I said, "Well, let's go look at them. If we can get front row seats, we'll do it." Well, we got front row seats down by the tunnel where they come out for the football game. So it was like by the bullpen. It wasn't it wasn't by the dugout or anything. It was like maybe like what would be in the corner today.
Hmm.
But front row is front row. I mean, they were really cool. Like, we were
Yeah.
right there. You could yell at the right fielder and talk to the guys in the bullpen. It was awesome. But the problem was you were facing the 50-yard line, which was like center field. So if you wanted to watch the game, you had to like crane your head over the left to actually see the game going on.
Yeah.
Those When those banners went up, I think well, you tell me. I feel like the thing was to try to make it feel less empty,
Yeah.
because you took out like 20,000 seats by by putting up this big curtain
Hmm.
to say, "Hey, it's not as empty, and it's a little more intimate." Um, yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah, it was a funny deal. Just the sort of project you give a young architect to work on. So
So did you came up to the Metrodome, and like, what was your level of involvement with
the
that?
funny thing on that, I was just the kid in the office doing the drawing work, so I didn't
Sure,
actually
sure.
go get to do a site visit for any part of it. But when I was a little kid growing up in Albert Lee, I mean, we went to the Metrodome a lot. I have a lot of great memories of going to games at the Metrodome.
Now hang on a sec. You're not Minnesotan, are you?
No, not really. We
Okay.
lived in Albert Lee,
I mean, I
in
like you. I like
yeah.
you, and you have some positive characteristics about you. I didn't want to automatically attribute them to being Minnesotan, but
No,
now things are falling into place.
we lived in Albert Lee for 8 years. Um,
Okay. Okay. So
and
you got a little of the vibe.
yeah, totally. Yeah. And it was when I was a, elementary school kid and junior high, so, those are great years and great memories.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
parents I think my parents, really were happy to get out. They thought it was way too cold and, um,
Oh, yeah. Well,
they weren't too fond of that. But
you didn't think it was too cold though, did you?
well, I
Because
was a kid. I was a kid. I didn't, mind.
yeah, bring it on.
So, last thing I just want to kind of touch on a little bit because it's a fun topic is you've shared a lot in many podcasts about your love for Disney World,
Yeah.
and your enjoyment of Disney World. And I just want to touch on this a little bit. And I was probably like, thinking way too deeply about all this stuff, but we took our kids there. I guess it was about a year and a half ago. I have actually no experience with Disneyland in California, just Disney World in
Mm,
Florida. And of course, we had a fantastic time. It was absolutely magical for the kids for the age they were, and everything about it was really really nice. And I just want to talk a little bit about it because it's fascinating to think about. Because if you could think about like the unstrong towns, it would be like Walt Disney World. It's if you think about the most incredible, or at least this was the thought I had at the time. If you thought about something
yeah,
that was like the most top down large enterprise you could conceive of, it's Disney World, and yet we
absolutely.
both really really enjoy it and find a lot to admire in it. I wonder if you could, maybe expand on that a little bit, or talk about it.
Well, let's start with this. I think the thing that I have always loved from the time that I think 13 was the first time that my family went, up until today, is that it is some of the best designed urban spaces in America.
Hmm.
If you want to experience, you and I hang out with a crowd where there's actually a debate over, do you like your urbanism gritty or do you like it,
Yeah.
fake? And like there's a whole strain of people who like, if I can't smell urine in the street, it's not a real city. And I'm from a small town. I actually like things nice.
Yeah.
So the idea of going to Disney World and riding transit and having it be like beautiful and comfortable and fun, the idea of like not having a car and like going to places and walking around, and yeah, there's a lot of other people there, but it's so well designed and proportioned, and
Hmm.
the the hyper attention on the human experience, not just standing how you stand in line and wait, but how you actually get the transition from one place to another, like the sight lines that you have and the smells, like all of this, the music. As someone who is an auditory person, the idea that you would walk between different places and the music would not clash with each other as you would go from one place to another, but would actually blend. I tried to explain this to my wife decades ago, and I didn't do a very good job. I said, it's comforting to me because it's so well designed. Um, I used to take when I ran my own planning and engineering firm, I used to take my team down, to just show them, here's what good urban design looks like. And like, look at the way these buildings are proportioned and laid out. Look at where they've done with the lighting. Look at this. It wasn't like we were going to come back to Brainerd, Minnesota and build Disney World. But my gosh, you look at the lights we put in the park, they're just like ugly street lights because,
Yeah.
oh, we need light here. The attention to detail is so deep and thorough. Um, and the stories are just legend of like, they would put a tree in a spot and Walt would come and he'd look at it and be like, oh, geez, I should be 3 feet over this way. And be like, why should it be 3 feet over? Well, look at like, here's where it blocks this view and that, like this and that. And then he'd walk away and they go, we got to move the tree 3 feet because now I'll never be able to walk by this and see it that way again. Our cities could spend way less money and be vastly more beautiful if we had just a tiny bit of the understanding of urban design that like the base Imagineer has.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that is the thing that, it is. Disney World is not meant to endure. It is, uh, I mean, they call it a stage. You're on stage when you're there at the park. It is, like a stage in a theatrical production. It's false fronts.
Mhm.
It's like not like super high quality construction. It's meant to be ripped down and rebuilt after a
Mhm.
certain amount of time. But your city is made to endure. I mean, you want your city to be around 100 years from now, 200 years from now. No, none of us build thinking that, well, this neighborhood's going to be disposable. If we grasped 10% of what the Disney Corporation grasps about building great places, it would be a revolution in this country of urban design.
Yeah, I think one of the things that struck me, or maybe it just occurred to me differently this time, as well, is since I'm in professionally now, I'm running this place management organization here in
Yeah,
Kansas City, um, and so I have gotten uh, a whole lot more exposure in day to day work with just management of public space, and how difficult that is, and just the challenges. I started to look at it a little bit through that lens, and I think when I started to do that, I'm just completely and utterly impressed with the management of everything that Disney does from beginning to end, from the entire experience from when you arrive through the process of going through security. Oh my God. The thousands and thousands of people that go through security per hour. And it's just this utterly seamless experience that you're just like, why can't the airport be like this?
yeah,
um,
yeah.
and all the aspects of you, it really makes you say, this is what I think a lot of us are really hoping. This is how we wish our places were managed on a daily basis, including the cleanliness of it. And I know it's a fake world, it's a theme park, but I think that's part of, it seems to me like that's part of the attraction.
Yeah, and I actually think we can discount it and say it's a fake world. Like I totally get it, but I also feel like what they've recognized that we all could easily recognize is that a huge part of creating value is the experience. We were having a chat here internally today about an article that one of our writers is working on about transit and just how a lot of the wayfaring is being taken out in New York and in other places because it was old and it
Mhm.
just didn't get replaced. And you can go to a place like Vancouver where they've got new parts of the system and those parts have great wayfaring and great signage. The reason is because the way we the way we finance transit focuses on massive one-time investments, but it doesn't really look at long-term the user experience and how do we improve that and how do we put money towards that and how do we make that fun. We would rather have double the size of the transit system and have it be really crappy for everybody than to have half the transit system and have it be marvelous for everyone who uses it. And that is really a byproduct of like our macro economy, right? Grow, grow,
Mhm.
grow, build, 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 more, more, more. Um, I, Disney builds a lot, but they never build anything without having a strategy for how it will be exquisitely maintained, for how it will really be uh, conformed and contorted to match the experience. They're always willing to check their assumptions, check their understandings based on how people use stuff. And I think that we could learn a lot from that. The the four-step process that we use at Strong Towns, the idea that you humbly observe where people struggle and you ask yourself what's the next smallest investment, and then you do that and you repeat the process. Part of that comes from really Walt Disney himself. Now, uh, this may be a apocryphal um, insight, but there's a story about Walt that I feels like it's genuine. He had an apartment at Disneyland, and he would go down in the morning and walk around in his bathrobe, watching people get the park ready. And one day he's out walking around, and they're putting up a fence. And he's just like, why are you putting up a fence there? And he's, well, people keep cutting across the grass. We want them to stay on the sidewalk. And his answer was, well, you've got it wrong. Rip out the sidewalk and put it here where people are walking. They're showing you where to go.
Mhm.
anyone who's been at one big box store and trying to drive to the next big box store and recognizes that they have to drive half a mile up the highway and then do a weird U-turn and come back and use a right in, right out and do all this. Anybody who's tried to cross a street and recognizes they have to walk half a mile to a street light to cross and then come back appreciates the idea that Walt has, which is observe where people are struggling, observe where this is hard, and just make it easier for them. To me, this is a genius insight, but it shouldn't be a hard one for us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing is the other observation that I think ties into all that is what you see with Disney World, or at least what I saw with it, is we're in this weird time and place in our culture where um, there's just not a lot of feeling that we're doing a lot of things really well. And even at the big corporate level, very large corporations, it seems like there's more bad news than good when it comes to all that. And here you have this massive corporation. The Disney Corporation is absolutely massive and owns so many things, and they own this enormous complex of Walt Disney World. And I think when you go there, it's like I can understand like how my parents would have thought about that era, that America does big things really well, because Disney World epitomizes an organization doing big things really, really well, down to the smallest detail, like you described.
Well, the Walt Disney embodies, for better and for worse. I mean, I think there's obviously two sides to this. The immediate post-war mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Disneyland itself is a hubristic undertaking to transform an orange grove out in the middle of nowhere into this dreamland where you could take your kids, you could take your grandparents, everybody can go and have this, wonderful time. His vision came about because he was sitting at like an old carnival, watching his kids go on rides that were dirty and not well taken care of, and grounds that weren't very fun. And it's like, you're as an adult, you're kind of ostracized from participating. Let's build this dream world. I think it is in many ways the best of that era, because he did have a dream and a vision that was very, I'm not going to use, I want to use the word inclusive, but I think that it's probably wrong in our current context. But he would have said, a place for everybody to come. He was also criticized for it being too expensive, like it is today. So like there was, there's limits to what
it is expensive.
It's very expensive. But I think it's also the worst of what we did, because it is this idea that you can create perfection it is possible to build to a finished state and have it be done right. And when it comes to magical make-believe places, I think that that's probably right, because they don't have a mindset that it will always be there. They are always redoing and refixing things and all that. But when we take that mentality and we bring it into our neighborhoods and our cities, and we're like, well, we can build this with a Disney mentality where we go out and build it perfect the first time and then walk away. Sure, we'll get 20 years where it's the nice neighborhood and the good place, and then it will become a downward spiral like every place else. And I do think we have not, it's almost become a place that allows us to believe in the wrong things. Like to me, I feel like if my mayor went to Disney World, he would come back not with the mentality of we need obsessive maintenance and to humbly observe where people are struggling and to respond to the human condition and have great urban design. He would come back and say, wow, we can build big stuff really quickly and have it be awesome. And I'm like, that's the wrong takeaway, buddy.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I think it does espouse a lot of those contradictions. So that feels like probably a good place to leave it. I should also mention, in case you didn't know, that Walt Disney is from small town Missouri.
He is. No, I definitely knew that. I've been wanting, it's Marceline. Is that the name of the place?
Marceline. Yeah.
Marceline. Okay. Yep. I'm saying it like a Minnesotan.
Yeah. Well, everything in Missouri is pronounced strange. That's just the way it is. It's also Missouri. So I should say that,
Do people actually say that? Missouri?
If you are not in Kansas City or St. Louis, it's pronounced Missouri.
Seriously, I did not
Oh,
know
yeah.
that. You know,
Mhm.
I spent a summer at Fort Leonard Wood, which was one of the
Oh,
most
that's
miserable
right.
summers of
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah.
So
That's
I had clay. Minnesota, we have this beautiful glacial outwash. Listen to me, like the engineering geek, but we have this nice glacial outwash. So when it rains, the water drains into the ground.
mhm.
And I'm in Kansas City, or I'm sorry, I'm in Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, and I have a tent that I'm sleeping in because I'm a
Uh-huh.
soldier, and it rains. And guess what happens to the water in Missouri? It
Yeah.
just runs into the lowest area and floods it,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
happened to be my tent.
And you just get mud everywhere. It's
Oh my
wonderful.
gosh, it's horrible,
Yeah.
just wretched.
But, yeah. But yeah, continuing the story just briefly, Walt Disney then, as a young man, went to Kansas City
Yeah,
and got his start in journalism in his professional career in Kansas City. And he worked at a place called the Laugh-O-Gram Studios, which a friend of mine here, a developer, is trying to restore, and they're trying to make it into an attraction. But
oh nice.
yeah, it should be a cool thing when it gets done.
Is
So
that where he did the first, because there was a first iteration before Mickey Mouse. Mickey
yes,
Mouse was the second prototype after he had a falling out with his business partner?
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
There is some urban legend that the first one was here at the Laugh-O-Gram Studios, but I
sure.
think that's
Let's go with that.
I mean, we'll claim it, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah, let's go with that.
hotly debated. Well, Chuck, thanks so much for doing this. For again, the book coming out is "Escaping the Housing Trap: The Strong Towns Response," and then the Strong Towns National Gathering is coming up May 14th and 15th in Cincinnati. So I can't wait to see you there and see all our other good friends, and look forward to a great week in a city that I've been looking forward to spending more time in.
Thank you, my friend, and I'm happy to introduce a whole bunch more people to your podcast. If you're not listening, if this is your first time listening and you're listening because of me, put this on your rotation because this is a very good podcast. And Kevin has a lot of my friends and our mutual friends and a lot of other interesting people. We talk about more than just Disney and Kansas City
Yeah,
and baseball.
absolutely.
So,
All right.
yeah,
Well, thanks,
thanks,
Chuck. I
friend.
appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.